Here we go. We're continuing with the introduction chapter on page 13. This is the record of the orally transmitted teachings translated by Burton Watson. I'm now going to go into point 4 of the introduction chapter, which is the first chapter of the orally of the Lotus Sutra that is the OTT discusses. All right, so point 4, point 4, the words a law that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. That's words and phrases. So that's from Lotus Sutra. Words and Phrases, Volume 3, Tentai, says, a law that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas refers to that which the Buddha gained enlightenment to in the origin of immeasurable meanings. Because he had done so, the thus come one guarded it and kept it in mind. Thus, later on in the sutra, it says the Buddha himself dwells in this great vehicle. Chapter 2, Expedient Means. Although he wished to reveal and teach it to others, the capacities of living beings were too dull. Therefore, for a long time he remained silent about this vital matter and did not hasten to expound it to others. That is why the sutra says it was guarded and kept in mind. On the Words and Phrases, which is Myolo, commented in volume 3 of his on the Words and Phrases, says, in the past he did not expound it. Therefore, the sutra uses the word guarded with regard to the law and with regard to the people's capacity. It was all guarded and kept in mind. Because the time had not come yet and the people's capacities had not developed sufficiently, he kept it hidden and he did not expound it. Hence it says he guarded it and kept it in mind. Because he did not expound it, it says he guarded. And because he did not reveal it, it says he kept it in mind. When Words and Phrases says for a long time he remained silent, it means that from early times in the Buddha's preaching life down to the present moment described in the Lotus Sutra, you should think over carefully and realize the true meaning of the words, this vital matter. Because what he's referring to is, again, you would be reading the Lotus Sutra from the perspective of Nichiren's teaching, so you would understand that every reference to the law, or Tentai talking about the law or what's being kept guarded in secret, has now been revealed in the latter day. As Nichiren's disciple, you understand that it's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, right? Now, here comes Nichiren. So that you should think over carefully and realize the true meaning of the words, this vital matter. I have, in my opinion, it means Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This vital matter is Kosa Rufu and widespread propagation of the teaching in the latter day of the law, of Nichiren's teaching in the latter day of the law. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, Nichiren says, with regard to this substance that the Buddha guarded and kept in mind, page 14, top of page 14, it is the two types of teachings, the theoretical and the essential, or the 5 characters, Myoho Renge-kyo, that make up the title of the sutra. So he's saying it's the theoretical and essential 14 chapters, each one's 14 chapters long, of the Lotus Sutra, but that it's also that it is the 5 characters of the title of the Lotus Sutra, which is Myoho Renge-kyo, okay, that make up the title of the sutra. As far as the act of guarding and keeping in mind, there are 7 ways in which to consider it. First, it can be considered from the standpoint of the time. Second, it can be considered from the standpoint of the people's capacities. Third, it can be considered from the standpoint of the person to be addressed. Fourth, it can be considered from the standpoint of the essential teaching and the theoretical teachings. Fifth, it can be considered from the standpoint of body and mind. Sixth, it can be considered from the standpoint of the substance of the doctrine. And seventh, it can be considered from the standpoint of the mind of faith. So the top way to be considered is the mind of faith, the mind that aspires to be of the same mind as Nichiren. That's the mind of faith in the latter day of the law, when the Daimoku is the sutra. You know, the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law is nothing other than Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nichiren's already said very clearly here. Okay? And I go on in the middle of page 14. And now Nichiren and his followers are spreading abroad this substance that was guarded and kept in mind. So obviously what was guarded and kept in mind by the Buddha, according to Tentai, was Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. First, with regard to the time, for more than 40 years the Buddha waited. Because the proper time had not yet come, he guarded and kept in mind the Lotus Sutra. Second, and the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and the Lotus Sutra are the same thing. That Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. I mean, Myoho Renge-kyo is what the title of the Lotus Sutra is. But the ages are different. This is now the fifth 500-year period that was prophesied in the Great Collection Sutra. The Lotus Sutra has lost its power because of the evil age that we exist in. That's why it's got to be something more readily understandable than the Makashikan. It has to be a doctrine that could be assimilated by common people to become Buddhas in their present form, not just to create fortune for a future lifetime. This is about becoming equal to Nichiren Daishonin according to his teachings. I'm going to read it to you. Okay, so first, with regard to the time, for more than 40 years the Buddha waited. Because the proper time had not yet come, he guarded and kept in mind the Lotus Sutra. Second, with regard to the people's capacities, the sutra says, because they rejected the law and failed to believe in it, they would fall into the three evil paths, chapter 2. Therefore, the space of more than 40 years, the Buddha did not expound it. Third, with regard to the person to be addressed, the Buddha intended to expound it to Shariputra, and so he waited. Fourth, with regard to the essential and theoretical teachings, the word guard refers to the essential teaching and the words kept in mind to the theoretical teaching. Fifth, with regard to the body and mind, guard refers to the body and keep in mind to the mind. Sixth, with regard to the substance of the doctrine is that which has existed inherently, that has existed, okay. Sixth, with regard to the substance of the doctrine, of the words, of the book, the substance, the original state, okay, of the doctrine. The substance of the doctrine is that which has existed inherently. The substance has existed inherently within human life and abides eternally. So it has no beginning and end. Okay? The aspect of all of us in a single moment that we exist together with everything else that's existing in that single moment is abiding eternally in a circumstance of going through the causal circumstance of transmigration. So he says again, 6, with regard to the substance of the doctrine, which is the original state of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the substance of the doctrine is that which has existed inherently and abides eternally. That's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The mind of pity and compassion inherent in all living beings. The mind of pity and compassion inherent in all living beings. That's their inherent Buddha nature. Okay? 7th, with regard to the mind of faith, which is the only mind that perceives this truth. It means to use the mind of faith to guard and keep in mind the Lotus Sutra. And again, in the latter day of the law, the Lotus Sutra is the Daimoku. In effect, when Nichiren and his followers recite Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are opening up the substance of this guarding and keeping in mind. Guarding represents the Buddha's insight. Keeping in mind, top of page 15. Keeping in mind represents the Buddha knowledge. These two words, knowledge and insight, correspond to the two teachings, the essential and theoretical. The Buddha knowledge is called Nyo. The Buddha insight is called, the Buddha knowledge is called Myo. The Buddha insight is called Ho. To carry out and practice the substance of this knowledge and insight is called Renge. It is the substance of cause and effect. Cause and effect put into words is Kyo. Moreover, the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra will be guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. The Universal Worthy chapter says, first they must be guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. Guarding and keeping in mind means guarding and keeping in mind Myoho Renge-kyo. When the Buddhas guard and keep in mind the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, they are guarding and keeping in mind Myoho Renge-kyo. The practitioner's capacities and the law are a single entity. Okay, the practitioner's capacities and the law are a single entity. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and your mind are a single entity. Okay, that's the reward body. Okay, and the Buddhas guard and keep them in mind as a single entity. This is what on the words and phrases by Tentai means when it says in volume 3, with regard to the law and with regard to the people's capacities, it was all guarded and kept in mind. They all had the Buddha nature. They all had the ability to bring this forth once they were ready to do so. In addition, Words and Phrases, volume 3 says the words guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas validate the earlier sign of the quaking of the earth. The quaking of the earth is symbolic of the fact that the Buddha has broken through the barriers of delusion in all 6 stages. In all 6 stages. In other words, you've gone from being a Buddha in theory to being an actual Buddha in reality. A person who accepts and upholds Myoho Renge-kyo will without doubt break through the barriers of delusion in all 6 stages. So you are guaranteed, once you hear the name and the words of the truth, to take it out of the theoretical aspect and start on the path toward ultimate supreme perfect enlightenment. That's the 6th stage. You will get there. The Supernatural Powers chapter says, a person of wisdom, after I passed into extinction, should accept and uphold this one. After I have passed into extinction, should accept and uphold this sutra. Such a person assuredly and without doubt will attain the Buddha way. This is what the sutra means when it says the Buddha himself dwells in this great vehicle. Again, in another sense, we may say that in this matter of the and there's an asterisk here. The 52 stages of Bodhisattva practice are divided into 6 categories: 10 stages of security, 10 stages of practice, 10 stages of devotions, 10 stages of development, a stage of near perfect enlightenment, and the stage of perfect enlightenment. One breaks through the barriers of delusion in each stage until one attains perfect enlightenment. So he's talking about it from the perspective of the theoretical first half of first 14 chapters. He's not really talking about the revelation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as it will be discussed later as we go along. Again, in another sense, we may say that in this matter of the Buddha guarding and keeping in mind all living beings, because again, he's talking about Shakyamuni. The guarding is that of the statement in chapter 3, simile and parable, I am the only person who can rescue and protect others, and that the keeping in mind is that of the statement in chapter 16, lifespan, at all times I have thought in mind, I have this thought in mind. And when we come to the Universal Worthy chapter, this idea is stated at first they must be guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. Nichiren, since the 32nd year of his life, has guarded and kept in mind Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So he's qualified that I've kept this guarded and kept in mind for my whole life. It's also saying here, at all times I have this thought in mind. And It's an asterisk. This is an abbreviated translation of "at all times I think to myself." The translation has been offered to indicate the meaning of keeping in mind. Okay, so we continue then on point 5. How are we doing on time?
15.
Okay. Point 5 on chapter 16. The words "the light," parenthetically, reach downward as far as the Avicii hell. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, this passage shows that beings in all of the 10 worlds can attain Buddhahood. The passage makes clear that Devadatta has attained Buddhahood. In the chapter following the Treasure Tower chapter, the matter of Devadatta's attaining Buddhahood is further explained in the so-called 2 admonitions. And it has a point that the 2 admonitions, 2 of the 5 proclamations in the 2 consecutive chapters, Treasure Tower and Devadatta. In the former, Shakyamuni admonishes the Bodhisattvas 3 times to spread the Lotus Sutra in the evil age after his passing. In the Devadatta chapter, Shakyamuni shows how Devadatta and the Dragon King's daughter attained Buddhahood through the powers of the sutra, and by it being the Dragon King's daughter and Devadatta, it shows there's no limitation to any living being attaining Buddhahood in their present form. Okay, I continue from the middle of this paragraph, point 5, first paragraph. But at the time represented by the present passage in chapter 1, Devadatta has already attained Buddhahood. The word reaching refers to the ray of light emitted by the Buddha from the shaft of white hair between his eyebrows. The ray of light from the white hair is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which touches all things. It would have to have already touched Devadatta from all the previous existences that he's actually experienced. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo has still been his original state. Do you understand? Okay, the ray of light from the white hair is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The passage immediately following that says that the ray of light reached upward to the Kanishtra, the heaven, represents the truth of non-substantiality. That is, it says, reach downward as far as the Avicii hell, represents the truth of temporary existence. And the light from the tuft of white hair represents the middle way. From it is clear that beings of the 10 worlds can all attain Buddhahood at the same time. In the Devadatta chapter, we are told that Devadatta will be adorned with the title Heavenly King Buddha. If we consider the time of the attainment of Buddhahood from the 2 aspects of environment and life, then we see that in the passage on reaching downward as far as the Avicii hell, the attainment of Buddhahood is being explained in terms of the environment, that is hell. And in Devadatta chapter, when we were told Devadatta will be called Heavenly King, thus come one, the attainment of Buddhahood is being explained in terms of the life of the individual. But in the case of both environment and life, the attainment of Buddhahood is accomplished through the wonderful law. And again, environment and life are both required together for existence in the 9 worlds to occur. Okay, so they really can't be separated, and that's also why they're joined together here in this explanation. This is leaving nothing out. Okay, now are you with me? Now when Nichiren and his followers perform ceremonies for the deceased, citing the Lotus Sutra and chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the ray of light from the Daimoku reaches all the way to the hell of incessant suffering and makes it possible for them to attain Buddhahood then and there. This is the origin of the prayers for transference of merit for the deceased. So you can chant for people that have already passed, that have not practiced, to hook up. Actually, what you're doing is you're making the cause for them to meet you in each lifetime and actually become a follower of what you're trying to get them to do and attaining Buddhahood in their present form. So as long as that's why we call it the treasures of the heart. As long as we remember to chant to the Gohonzon about anything, we attach it to our karmic influence. Okay? And generally speaking, if we're chanting about anything, it's with the compassion and wisdom of the Buddha. That's why we're sitting in front of the Gohonzon. So I'm not talking about the times when we're chanting for a benefit per se, an outward, like, give me this, I need this. Okay, I'm talking about serving the law. Okay, and serving those deceased individuals you're making the prayer for the salvation of by asking that they be attached to you for the full responsibility of you to get them to chant. Okay, so continues on page 17. Even if persons who had no faith, see, so this doesn't exclude anybody that might be in non-substantiality. Even if persons who had no faith in the Lotus Sutra have fallen into the hell of incessant suffering as bad people, as practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, their filial offspring may offer them the ray of light from the Daimoku. This is about our parents specifically. How could this principle of the Daimoku enabling one to attain Buddhahood be any different than it is in the case of persons who have strong faith in the sutra? So it says, no matter how strong your faith is, you still have this capacity, because innately you are a Buddha, and whenever you chant, you validate the fact that you're already the Buddha exactly as you are. You just don't realize it. Therefore, Nichiren is led to conclude that this passage on the ray of light reaching downward as far as the Avicii hell, and he's basically speaking in third person here, because he's saying now Nichiren is led to conclude that this passage on the ray of light reaching down as far as the Avicii hell is intended to depict the way in which the Buddha, emitting a ray of light, makes it possible for Devadatta to attain Buddhahood. Okay, I'm at point 6. Can you keep going? Okay, so, all right, good. Point 6, the words on the bottom of page 17. Point 6, the words "why" from the white tuft between the eyebrows of our leader and teacher. The commentary words and phrases, as Chintai says, therefore, since he preaches the law, enters into samadhi, and is able to lead others, he has already been designated a leader and teacher. So that actually describes all of us if we take those same actions. All right? It's not specific to just Shakyamuni. This is what Buddhists do. All right? The record of the orally transmitted teaching says at the top of page 18, here the words leader and teacher refer to Shakyamuni Buddha. Preaching the law refers to the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, and entering into samadhi refers to the samadhi of the origin of the immeasurable meanings. Generally speaking, there are two types of leaders and teachers: bad leaders and teachers, and good leaders and teachers. Examples of bad leaders and teachers are Honen, Kobo, Chikaku, and Shisho. Examples of good leaders and teachers are Tintai and Dingyo. Now that we have entered the latter day of the law, Nichiren and his followers act as good leaders and teachers. So all of those declarations about other people proceeding now don't really apply to us. He just qualified. However, now we've entered the latter day of the law, Nichiren and his followers act as good leaders and teachers. The law they preach is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It's different than these other dudes. Okay? And the samadhi they enter is the firmly fixed state of mind of one who accepts and upholds the Lotus Sutra. We chant the Daimoku to the Gohonzon. That's what separates us from all those other followers of the law. Okay? You should pay special attention to the word able. Because why are we able to? Because we're the original disciples of the original teacher of this law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We're the only ones that have the capacity, and we're born only in the evilest of all evil times, where people are screwed up enough that they're desperate to find a solution to their misery. And that's what we're preparing for. We're preparing for widespread propagation. That's why I'm rereading all this to you. Okay, you should pay special attention to the word able. It's a very special word. It's talking about you. In the statement, he is able to lead others, and consider its meaning. I have. The passage in the Emerging from the Earth chapter that reads foremost leaders and guiding teachers refers to the same type of persons. It means in effect, those persons who preach the law to all the people of the country of Japan in order to lead them. Same as Nichiren. Same mind as Nichiren. Okay? Point 7. The words heavenly drums sounded of themselves. The commentary, Words and Phrases, Volume 3, that's again Tentai, says, heavenly drums sounded of themselves is symbolic of one who takes it upon oneself to preach without being asked. Heavenly drums sounded of themselves is symbolic of one who takes it upon himself to preach without being asked. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says this passage praises the way in which the auspicious omens appearing in this land and other lands are all the same. One who takes it upon oneself to preach without being asked refers to the fact that Shakyamuni, thus come one, has taken it upon himself to preach the Lotus Sutra, the wonderful law, without being asked. Now, Nichiren and his followers also take it on themselves to preach without being asked. When they declare that that the Nimbutsu leads to the hell of incessant suffering, that Zen is the teaching of the heavenly devil, the true word will ruin the nation, and that the precepts is traitorous, they are taking it upon themselves to preach without being asked. There's refutation, that's called shakabuku. Because they do so, the three types of powerful enemies have appeared on the scene, because they are all about to reveal their enlightened nature that inherently exists already. This is the 4 dictums, by the way. The heavenly drums are Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Of themselves mean they are unhindered by any obstacles. Sounded refers to the sound of the chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In another sense, we may say that when all living beings freely send forth their words and voices, this is the case of taking it upon themselves to preach without being asked. Taking it upon themselves to preach, we may say, refers even to the voices and cries of the wrongdoers being punished by the wardens of hell, to the famished cries of the hungry spirits, or to the voices of all living beings as moment by moment they are beset by the 3 poisons, greed, anger, and foolishness in this Sahe world. All these voices are in essence our Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The heavenly drums are the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo, the essential teaching and the theoretical teaching. Heavenly refers to the highest principle, which is comparable to heaven. There's nothing higher than the highest principle. Take it upon oneself to preach refers to the preaching of the law by the Buddha of limitless joy, which we are all Buddhas of limitless joy in the latter day of the law, realizing through the stage 6 of teaching of Nichiren that we are Buddhas exactly as we are. We are all Buddhas of limitless joy. Happy for everybody else to join us at the same level and discover this wonderful treasure that exists within them too. On the Words and Phrases, Volume 3 says, when Words and Phrases states that this is symbolic of one who takes it upon oneself to preach without being asked, it refers to the opening of the Expedient Means chapter, where the Buddha arises from his samadhi and addresses Shariputra, delivering praise now in extended language, now in abbreviated form. He also urges the auspicious omens of this land and other lands, tremble in 6 different ways and all that stuff, as well as things described in words and indescribable, as things that can be describable in words and indescribable. Sometimes he speaks of the reality, sometimes of wisdom, sometimes of the wisdom to understand it. These reality and wisdom, Kyochi Myogo, are the root and foundation of the entire sutra, the crux of the 5 principles of preaching. Therefore, this matter must not be approached lightly. So if you really want to attain Buddhahood in this lifetime, you have to be serious about doing it. You have to follow the recipe that Nichiren has left you to be able to do it in a single lifetime. Nobody else leaves you a recipe for doing it in a single lifetime. Only Nichiren's teaching does that. What in the passage of commentary is called the root and foundation of the entire sutra, the crux of the 5 periods of preaching, this is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And we'll pause there on page 20 at the top. We'll do chapter 2, Expedient Means. We finished introduction. Thank you very much.